So for this video, we are going to be talking about the powers of 10. And I'm on the wrong page, sorry about that. Okay, so we're going to start by first looking at the definition, and it says a power of 10 is the number 10 multiplied by itself a certain number of times. Powers of 10 can be written in exponents as fractions and in decimal form. So positive powers of 10 represent really big numbers, and negative powers of 10 represent really small numbers. So down here, we need to complete the table for powers of 10 with positive exponents. This is in exponential form, and this column is in standard form. So we have 10 to the 0 power. The exponents tell us how many zeros we'll need after that 1. So if we have a 0, we need 0 zeros. So in standard form, 10 to the 0 power is just 1. Now this time we have 10 to the 1 power. That 1 tells us how many zeros we need. So if we have 1 exponent, we need 1 0. Now, we aren't given the exponential form this time. So we need to figure out how many exponents we need. So we know it's going to be 10 to a power, and we can count our zeros, so 1, 2, and get our exponent, so 10 to the second power. We can also think about it like this and write it in scientific notation to help us. So we have our decimal here. We need to move it 2 spaces to make it a number between 1 and 10. So 1 between 1 and 10. So it'd be 1 times 10 to the 2, and this number would give us our exponential form. Now we have 10 to the negative 3. We can use our exponents to tell us how many zeros we'll need. We need 3 zeros. So 1, 2, 3. We can also think about this in scientific notation and think of, if we have our 1 and our decimals here, how many spaces do we need to move to make it our exponent? So 1, 2, 3, fill in your zeros, and our number is 1000. So for this one, we need to figure out our exponential form. We can count our zeros to get our exponential form, so 1, 2, 3, 4. We'll have 10 to the 4th power. We can also think of this number in scientific notation. If we have a decimal and we don't see it, it's at the end. 1, 2, 3, 4. Be 1 times 10 to the 4th power. This number gets us our exponents. And for the last one, I want you to try to do this one on your own. Think about how many zeros we have and how many exponents we're going to have in an exponential form. Please pause the video. Okay, so we are going to count our zeros. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Be 10 to the 5th power. We can also think about this as 1 times 10. We need to figure out how many loops we need to make it a number between 1 and 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So be 10 to the 5th power. This exponent in our scientific notation is telling us our exponential form. Okay, so now let's talk about when we have negative exponents. And when we have negative exponents with powers of 10, that's not saying we have a negative number. That's saying that we have a really small number. And again, we have 10 to the 0 power. 10 to the 0 power in decimal form is just 1. And as a fraction, it would be 1 over 1. Now we're given this fraction. And when we have a number on the bottom, it's going to have a positive exponent. If we have a number on the top of our fraction, it's going to have a negative exponent. So if we don't have an exponent in our number, it is 1. If we have 10 to the 1 power, we need to bring that exponent upstairs to make it negative and to make it just an exponential form. I want you to remember that story we had about that house. So here's our house. And we have 1 over 10 to the 1 power. Right now we're downstairs. And the only way we can go upstairs is if we have a negative attitude. So our parents send us to our room, we have a negative attitude. If we want to be downstairs, we have a positive attitude. We're happy, we can hang out with our family and our friends. But when we're in trouble, we're sad and grouchy, and we have a negative attitude. So negative exponents will go on the top, and positive exponents will go on the bottom. So we need to bring this 10 to the first power upstairs to write it only in exponential form. So we have 10 to the negative 1, because we're bringing it upstairs, over 1. We don't really need to write this over 1, so it's just 10 to the negative 1 power. Now we need to write this 10 to the negative 1 in decimal form. Now we can think about this two ways. This exponent is going to tell us how many zeros we need, and it's going to be 1 less than our exponent. So 1 minus 1 would be 0. So we need 0 zeros. So it would just be 0.1. We need 0 zeros after our decimal. You can also think about this 10 to the negative 1 as 1 times 10 to the negative 1 power. Our decimal is at the end, and we need to move it 1 space to the left to make it a negative number. So our new number is 0.1. Now, for the next one, we are given the decimal. We need to make this decimal into exponential form. So we need to think about how many zeros we have. Remember, our exponent is 1 more than how many zeros we have. So we only have 1 0, so we need to add 1. We can get 2. We know it's going to be negative because it's a really small number. Now that can be a little confusing, so there's another way we can figure that out, and that's writing it in scientific notation. We need to make this number between 1 and 10. And how many loops do we need to do that? So we have 1, 2. So it's 1 times 10 to the second power, and it is negative because it's a really small number. This number is telling us our exponential form, 10 to the negative 2. Now we also need to write 10 to the negative 2 as a fraction. Remember that story, if we want to bring it downstairs as a fraction because we can't have a decimal upstairs, we need to write it as 10 to the negative 2, and we need to bring it downstairs and make it positive. So we'll have 1 over, bringing it down, 10 to the second. Well, we're not done yet because this still has an exponent. We need to write it fully in fraction form, so it would be 1 over, how many zeros do we need? 2, so 1 over 100. Now we have 10 to the negative 3 in our next one. I want you to go ahead and pause the video. I want you to think about how you're going to write this as a fraction and how you're going to write it as a decimal. Hit play when you're ready to check your answers. Please pause. Okay, so we have 10 to the negative 3. So we need to write this in fraction form. So it's like saying 10 to the negative 3 over 1. We need to bring that negative downstairs and make it positive. We're going to have 1 over 10 to the third power, but this is still in exponential form. It's not fully in fraction. So we need to write that number out the long way. So we'll have 1, and our exponents will tell us how many zeros we need. 1, 2, 3 zeros. Now we also need to write this number as a decimal. So you can think about this two ways. You can think about it as we'll have 1 less than our exponents after our decimal in zeros, or you can think about it in scientific notation. So if we have 1 times 10 to the 3, our decimal's here, and we need to go 3 loops to the left. So 1, 2, 3. Fill in your zeros, and your decimal will be 0.001. Now you can check this because our exponents were 3, and our zeros after our decimal will be 1 less, so there would be 2 zeros, so that is correct. Okay, now I want you to go ahead and do the last 2 rows on your own, and go ahead and pause the video. Okay, so we are given the decimal. In the decimal, we can count them and get 1 more to get our exponents, or we can write it in scientific notation. So we need to figure out how to make this number between 1 and 10. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 times 10 to the negative 4th power. This number will be our exponent. So our exponent will be 10 to the negative 4. We need to write this number as a fraction. So we have 10 to the negative 4 over 1. We need to write it as we need to bring down our exponent and make it positive. So it will be 1 over 10 to the 4th. We can only have a positive attitude downstairs. Now we can write it in full fraction form by counting our zeros. We need 4 zeros, 1, 2, 3, 4, and that is how we do number, this one. Okay, so sorry, I forgot about this one. You can just ignore that. But we are given the fraction form, and we need to now make it into exponential form and decimal form. So the first thing we're going to do is count our zeros. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it would be 1 over 10 to the 5th power. Now if I need to write this just in exponential form, so I need to bring the 10 to the 5th power upstairs. When I bring it upstairs, it's in trouble. It's not happy, it's negative. So it would be 10 to the negative 5th power. Now I need to write this number in decimal form now. You can think about it two ways. That negative is going to tell us how many zeros we have, that negative 5. So we need one less than 5, which would be 4. Or we can think about it as 1 times 10 to the 5th, negative 5th power. Our decimals here, move it 5 spaces to the left, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Fill in your zeros. Our answer will be 0.1234, 1. And you can see there's 4 zeros after the decimal. That's 1 less than our exponent. And that is how you do powers of 10.